Hi friends, I hope everyone is doing well. For today's Collage with Me video, I brought out my quote art journal. If you haven't seen any of my other videos where I'm creating in this journal, I'll give you a quick backstory. I keep quotes and sayings that resonate with me on post-it notes. I'm working on moving them from the post-it notes into this journal. Let me open it up and show you the page we'll be working on and the quote that we're going to be moving into this journal. Today we'll be moving "keep going" into this journal. I chose this saying because I needed a reminder, a bit of a pep talk, and it's short and to the point. So now let's go over the supplies we'll be using. We have a lot more supplies that we'll be using this time around. Let's start by talking about the paint we'll be using. I brought out matte acrylic paint in Yellow Bright, Orange Deep, Yellow Green, and Green Deep. I want the contrast between the cool colors of the journal page against the warm colors of the text. So let me put these aside, go over the next supplies. Our paintbrush we'll be using is a Princeton Velvet Touch size 4 round. When practicing painting the text, I found this paintbrush size were easier for me to use than, say, a larger size round brush or a flat brush. Then I have a Sharpie to outline the text. Piece of paper. It's an 80-pound drawing paper. This is what we're going to use to write the text on. I don't write directly into the journal, so I'll be writing on this text, cutting around it, and then gluing it onto the page. And then we'll be using liquid glue this time around. Since I'm going to be cutting around the text, it'll probably be better for me to use liquid glue instead of glue stick. I want to avoid any tugging or anything that would tear the text. Then we have our cutting mat and X-Acto knife. I have more control using X-Acto knife than scissors when cutting around the text. Then we got the Sorel paper. I have the text on tracing paper right now, so I'll be using the Sorel paper to transfer from the tracing paper to our paper. And then a pen to use with the Sorel paper to transfer the text to the paper. And then finally a kneaded eraser to lighten up any heavy marks caused by the Sorel paper. Sometimes I put too much pressure when I'm using the Sorel paper and the line work is too dark to cover with paint, so I use a kneaded eraser to lighten up some of the lines. Now we're going over how the design came about. I worked out how I was going to create the saying in my sketchbook first. I came up with this font in one take. I want the text to stand out, and this font is bold. Also, I'll be cutting around the text, and I want the letters to touch so I can keep the saying in one piece, and this font will make it easier to cut around the letters. Now deciding on the colors, the first go around with painting the text, I used cool colors. I like it, but I wanted the text to be bold, so I decided to use warm colors instead. There's a contrast between the cool ground and the warm text. Initially, I was going to have the text written on a 3" by 4" paper with the painted ground. Then I thought it'd be fun to cut around the saying. So that's when I just tried doing it on the raw paper. And I like the way it looks, especially the yellow paint. As you can see, it's more opaque when it's on just the raw paper instead of on a painted ground. The saying will be more dimensional if I cut it out, and that goes with it being a bold statement or a bold saying. Now let's move on to painting the saying. First thing we need to do is transfer the saying from this tracing paper to the 80-pound paper. And if you haven't used Sorel paper before, you want to put the color side down on the paper. As you can see, this is a lighter side and that has the color side. And you can see I've used this before. So you're going to put that down on your paper you're transferring to. Then put your tracing paper on top. And I use washi tape to secure the tracing paper to the paper. There's other colors of Sorel. There's yellow, red, blue, and white. Normally I would use yellow, but I'm using graphite, so hopefully it'll be easier for you to see the line work when I finish. And I'm going to use a ballpoint pen to follow the lines of the text on the tracing paper. You could also use a pencil as well. So you don't put too much pressure, but I tend to do that. So that's why I have that eraser to lighten up any of my lines. So just carefully follow your lines of your tracing paper. So here's the text, and you can see I did go pretty heavy on some of the areas. So that's why you want to take the kneaded eraser and just lighten up some of the heavy lines. The text looks good, so the next step is painting the text, outlining it in Sharpie, cutting it out, then gluing it into the journal. Since I can't talk and paint at the same time, this section will be a mix of voiceover narration and music. So let's get started. I went back in after I finished the first line of the black Sharpie, and as you can see, I made it thicker and made it bolder, and that reinforces our theme that keep moving is a bold statement. The next step is I'm going to cut around all the letters with an X-Acto knife. When cutting out a quote or a saying, I find it's best to cut away the small areas first, then any larger areas in the middle. The last area to cut away will be the area around the outside. It makes it easier to cut out and you have more control. After the text is completely cut out, I take a Sharpie and touch up any areas that you can still see the paper. Initially, I was going to place the cutout horizontally in the journal, but it felt a bit predictable. After playing around a bit with the placement, I decided having it on the diagonal will make it more interesting looking. So what I'm going to do now is take this glue, liquid glue, glue the back and place it in the journal, and then we'll have one final review. Let's do a quick review of this completed page. I'm glad I placed the saying on the diagonal. It's more interesting than a horizontal placement. I'll remind myself to place sayings or quotes in this journal on the diagonal more often. I like the contrast between the cool colors of the page, which is this lavender and purple, against the warm colors of the saying. The saying isn't painted or cut out perfectly, and I'm okay with that. It's more interesting to have art that's a bit imperfect. It's handmade, not created on a computer. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for watching. Take care.